My fiancé asked me for a break to go test things out with the ex who cheated on her, so I sold our house, erased every trace of myself, and vanished. You want to date your ex to make sure I'm good enough? Renee didn't answer right away. She sat on the edge of our bed, still in her work clothes, twisting her engagement ring like it had suddenly started hurting her finger. It's not like that, she said. I just need clarity. I asked what that meant, what clarity looked like exactly. She said she needed time to figure out her feelings for Tyler, the same Tyler who cheated on her twice in college, the same Tyler she used to cry about at 2 a.m. while I held her and told her she deserved better. I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I felt something in my chest go quiet and still, like a furnace shutting off. Take your break, I said. She blinked. I think some part of her wanted me to chase her down the driveway, to fight for her, to prove I cared enough to grovel. Instead, I just nodded and went downstairs to make coffee I didn't drink. She packed a bag that night, toothbrush, 2 changes of clothes, the gray hoodie I'd bought her for her 26th birthday. She left for her mother's house a little after 10, and the door clicked shut behind her with a sound I will remember for the rest of my life. She thought I'd be sitting here when she got back, waiting, available, frozen in place like a chess piece she could return to whenever she finished testing the board. She had no idea what I was already setting in motion. I called Cody an hour later. He showed up with a pizza and zero patience for sugarcoating anything. She's going to come crawling back once it falls apart with Tyler, he said, mouth full. It always falls apart with guys like Tyler. He was probably right, but I had already decided I wasn't going to be standing there when she came crawling. The house was in my name. Renee liked to act like it was ours, picking out paint colors for the guest room, hanging photos of us in the hallway. But I had paid every single mortgage payment for 3 straight years while she paid down her own student loans. Monday morning, 8 a.m., I called a realtor named Patricia, who I'd found through a coworker. The market in our part of Ohio was hot that spring. We had 2 offers within 4 days, both over asking. I was 29 years old. Renee was 27. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for the last 8 months, and in all that time, I genuinely believed I knew her down to the bone. I knew she hated cilantro, that she slept with a fan on even in winter, that she still kept a box of letters from her grandmother in the back of her closet. I thought I knew the architecture of her heart. What I didn't know was that there was a room in that architecture I'd never been allowed into, a room with Tyler's name on the door, Tyler Brandt. They dated for 2 years at Ohio State, and from what Renee told me early in our relationship, back when we still told each other everything, he'd cheated on her with her own roommate during their sophomore year, then again with a girl from his fraternity their senior year, right before graduation. She'd found out about the second one from a mutual friend's Instagram story. She told me she cried in a campus parking garage for 45 minutes before she could drive home. I remembered the night she told me that story. We were 8 months into dating, lying on my old apartment's secondhand couch, and she said, I never want to feel that stupid again. I held her and told her she'd never have to. There was an earlier sign I didn't catch at the time, or maybe I caught it and just didn't want to look at it directly. 2 years ago, Renee's college roommate Mara got married in Cincinnati, and Tyler was a groomsman. Renee came home from that wedding a little too quiet. She said it was nothing, just nostalgia, just the strange feeling of seeing old friends get older. I believed her because I had no reason not to. Looking back, I think that wedding was the night the door to that room cracked open again. I remember small things from that weekend now that I didn't think twice about at the time. She kept her phone face down on the nightstand the whole drive home, which wasn't like her. She usually left it wherever, screen up, no passwords between us. She also brought up Tyler twice in casual conversation over the following month, once comparing his new job in finance to mine like she was running some kind of private audit, and once mentioning, almost offhand, that he'd really grown up since college. I laughed it off both times. I told myself jealousy over an ex who cheated on her twice was beneath me, that bringing it up would make me look insecure. I wish now I'd asked the obvious question instead of swallowing it. We were good together, or I thought we were. We had a rhythm. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market on 4th Street, where she always bought too many tomatoes and never used them in time. A running joke about the neighbor's dog that barked at exactly 6:15 every evening like it had an alarm set. I proposed on a Tuesday in October at the Overlook off Route 9. No elaborate flash mob, just the 2 of us and a ring I'd saved 4 months of bonus checks to afford. She cried and said yes before I even finished the sentence. The 8 months after the engagement felt, in hindsight, like 2 different relationships happening at once without my knowledge. On the surface, we picked a venue, a barn outside Columbus with string lights and a creek running along the back property line. We picked a date, the following June. Renee's mother started a Pinterest board. I bought a suit. Underneath all of that, apparently, she was still texting a man who had cheated on her twice, asking him questions she should have been asking herself. I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew the surface, the venue, the suit, the calendar marked in red. 8 months later, she sat on the edge of our bed and asked me for a break to go figure out if she still had feelings for the man who'd made her cry in a parking garage twice. I packed up everything she'd left behind in the house. Her clothes from the closet, the 3 scented candles she kept lined up on the bathroom counter like a little altar, the throw pillows she'd insisted on buying that I privately thought were ugly, but never said so because they made her happy. I hired movers movers from a company 2 towns over, paid extra for same-day service, and had every box dropped at her mother's front porch with a single note taped to the top box. Here's your stuff. Good luck with Tyler. I didn't write it to be cruel. I wrote it because it was the truth, and I was done softening truths for her comfort. That same week, Renee called me, not to apologize, but to ask why I'd moved so fast. I asked for a break, she said. Not a divorce. We're not even married yet. Why does it feel like you're treating this like a divorce? I told her I wasn't treating it like anything except what it was. She'd asked for time to consider another man. I was using my own time to stop waiting on her decision. She went quiet on the phone for a long moment, the kind of silence that used to mean she was building toward tears. Then she said, "You're being dramatic," and hung up before I could respond. 2 days later, she tried a different angle. She texted asking if we could talk like adults over coffee, said she just wanted to explain her side, that I was painting her as something she wasn't. I agreed, mostly out of habit. 4 years of conditioning telling me to hear her out. We met at a coffee shop on Main Street, the same one where we'd had our first real date. She cried within the first 10 minutes, told me Tyler wasn't even the point, that she just felt like she'd lost herself somewhere in our relationship and needed to find pieces of who she used to be before she could commit fully. I asked her plainly if Tyler was one of those pieces. She didn't answer the question. She asked instead why I couldn't just trust her process. I paid for both coffees and left. Mutual friends started texting within hours, fishing for drama the way people always do when a 4-year relationship suddenly goes quiet on social media. I didn't lie to a single one of them. I didn't build a sob story. I told them exactly what happened. She wanted to explore things with her ex before marrying me, so I decided I deserved better than being someone's backup plan while she made up her mind. You should have seen how fast people's opinions of her changed once they heard that one sentence. Quick pause from the story. If you enjoy these stories, consider taking a listen to our Spotify show linked in the description for early access to new stories in better audio quality. Now back to the video. Our friend Haley called me a week later, furious on my behalf. She's telling everyone you two are just taking space to grow, she said. Not one word about Tyler. I sent her 3 screenshots. Conversations Renee had no idea I still had access to through our shared cloud photo album. Conversations where she'd told her sister she just needed to see Tyler one more time before she could fully commit. By the next morning, half our friend group knew the real story. Renee tried one more angle after that, the angle I think she should have led with from the start. She showed up at the house unannounced on a Saturday, before the movers had come for the last of her things, and stood on the porch asking to come inside and just talk, no pressure, no expectations. I told her the house wasn't really mine to host conversations in much longer, that I'd already accepted an offer, and we were closing in 9 days. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "You're really doing this," she said, not a question. "You're really just going to throw away 4 years over a break I asked for in good faith." I told her that good faith doesn't usually involve texting an ex who cheated on you for 2 years before you ever bring it up to your fiancé. She didn't have an answer for that. She left without coming inside. I'd also been quietly eyeing a job in Seattle for over a year, a senior account position at a firm that had reached out to me twice before. I never pursued it seriously because Renee didn't want to relocate. Said she had her clients here, her family here, her whole life mapped out within a 40-mile radius. I applied that same week she left. The recruiter called back in 2 days. I had an offer within 5, a base salary of $94,000 plus relocation assistance, more than I'd ever made in Ohio. The house sale and the job offer landed almost on top of each other, like 2 trains arriving at the same platform at the same minute. I remember sitting in my car in the bank parking lot after depositing the closing check, just breathing, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, clarity, the same word Renee had used, except mine didn't require Tyler. She found out about the boxes first. Her mother called her in a panic, said there were 6 boxes on the porch, and a note that made her stomach drop. Renee called me 20 minutes later, her voice shaking in a way I recognized from every fight we'd ever had, where she knew she was wrong but wasn't ready to say it. "What are you doing? Why does it feel like this is over?" "Because it is," I said. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She cried, said this wasn't what she meant when she asked for space, said she just wanted a little time to think clearly, that's all, just a little time. "What did you expect?" I asked her. "That I'd sit here like a loyal dog while you drove your ex to see if he's improved? But what if I realize you're the one I actually want? Then you'll have learned an expensive lesson about taking people for granted." I hung up before she could answer. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else that week. The house closed 2 weeks later, $10,000 over asking, the fastest sale Patricia said she'd seen all year. I packed my entire adult life into 6 cardboard boxes and a duffel bag and got on a one-way flight to Seattle on a Thursday in May. My new apartment in Ballard had a view of the water if I leaned far enough out the kitchen window. My new co-workers didn't know a single thing about my old life. For the first time in months, I could breathe without bracing for the next conversation about Tyler. Then Tyler messaged me. Out of every person on earth, it was him. He found my number through a mutual contact and sent a message that started with, "This is going to be weird, but I think you deserve to know." He told me Renee had been talking to him for months. months, long before she ever asked me for that break. She'd been texting him steadily since Mara's wedding 2 years earlier, keeping him warm in her back pocket in case I ever stopped being the safer, steadier bet. He said he felt guilty being part of it and wanted me to have the truth, even if it didn't change anything for him. I read that message 4 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. What struck me most wasn't even the timeline, though that alone rearranged everything. It was the specific detail Tyler included almost as an afterthought that Renee had asked him in a message dated the previous February whether he thought I was the settling kind of guy or the real thing. I read that sentence and felt something in my chest that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was the particular ache of realizing you'd been a measuring stick the whole time, not a person. 4 years, an engagement, a ring I'd saved for, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, she'd been quietly asking another man to grade me. Her clients started pulling their projects one by one over the following month. She worked freelance, doing brand consulting, and word travels fast in small industries when someone shows they can't be trusted with basic commitments. Her sister Brielle reached out to me in June, not to defend Renee, but to tell me Renee was falling apart, that she genuinely believed I would just wait around indefinitely while she figured out what she wanted, the way I always had before. I thought that was finally the end of it. A clean break, a new city, a life she would never see firsthand again, only hear about secondhand through people who used to be ours and were now just mine. Then last week, 11 months after I left Ohio, an email landed in my inbox, not from Renee, from a lawyer named Gregory Fenimore, representing her, claiming I owed her half the proceeds from the house sale because of a verbal agreement we had supposedly made before we ever got engaged. Attached to that email was a document I had never seen before in my life, a document with my signature sitting right at the bottom of the page. I stared at that signature for a long time. It looked like mine. The slant was right, the loop on the J was right, even the small flourish I do on the final letter without thinking about it was right. But I had never signed anything promising Renee half of a house I'd paid for alone for 3 years before we were even engaged. The document itself was almost convincing on its face. 2 paragraphs of dense, vaguely legal language stating that both parties agree the residence at 14 Larkspur Lane shall be considered joint property regardless of title in recognition of shared contributions to the relationship. It was dated 14 months before our engagement, back when we'd barely moved in together, back when I was still putting down the bulk of every mortgage payment out of my own account, because Renee was still paying off $22,000 in student loans. We never had that conversation. We never signed anything like that, I would have remembered. I called Cody first because Cody had been there for almost everything. He told me to call a lawyer before I called anyone else, including Renee. I did. Her name was Marisol Vega, recommended by a co-worker who'd gone through a messy divorce the year before. I sent her the document that same afternoon. She called back within 2 hours. This signature's been lifted, she said. Look at the pressure variance under magnification. It's a composite. Somebody took a real signature of yours from another document and pasted it onto this one, then printed it fresh. I asked her how she could tell. She said the ink density was inconsistent in a way that didn't happen with a live pen on paper, that the kerning around my signature suggested it had been digitally placed rather than physically written. She said it wasn't subtle once you knew what you were looking at, but it would have fooled almost anyone who wasn't trained to look. I thought about every document I'd ever signed in front of Renee. Then I remembered something specific. 18 months earlier, before the engagement, before any of this, Renee had asked me to sign a birthday card for her father, something sentimental about turning 60, and I'd signed it on a blank sheet first as a joke because my handwriting looked terrible that day and I wanted to practice before signing the real card. I remembered her laughing, telling me to throw the practice sheet away. I remembered handing it to her instead because the trash can was on her side of the kitchen. I never saw that sheet again. Marisol pulled the property records and the original closing documents from the house sale. She found the timestamp on the so-called agreement. It had been generated 4 days after I sold the house, not before our engagement like the email claimed. Whoever made it hadn't been careful enough about the metadata. I called Renee directly for the first time in 11 months. She picked up on the second ring like she'd been waiting. "You scanned my signature off a birthday card," I said. There was a long silence on the other end, long enough that I almost thought the call had dropped. "I didn't think you'd notice," she finally said, not a denial, a confession dressed up as an excuse. "You didn't think I'd notice that you forged a legal document and sent a lawyer after me for half a house I paid for alone? I needed something, okay? Tyler and I didn't work out. He had someone else the whole time too, did you know that? And I have nothing. No house, no ring, nothing to show for 4 years, and you gotta just leave and start a whole new life like none of it happened. You're the one who asked for the break," I said. "I didn't take anything from you that was yours to begin with." "You took everything," she said, her voice climbing now, less controlled. "You erased me. You sold our house in 2 weeks like I was a stranger. You sent my things back with a note like I was a delivery you were returning. You were testing whether I was worth keeping while you found out if Tyler was worth having," I said. "I just decided not to wait around for the verdict." There was a pause, and I heard another voice in the background, muffled, asking who she was talking to. It was her mother. I heard Renee cover the phone for a second, heard her say, "Nobody, it's fine." Something about that small lie after everything told me more than the the forged document had. She was still managing perception even now, even in the middle of getting caught. "You don't get to just decide I was using you," she said when she came back on the line. "You don't know what was going on in my head." "I don't need to know what was in your head," I said. "I know what was in your texts. I know what was in that document with my forged signature on it. Those things speak for themselves." She started crying, the same crying I used to feel responsible for fixing. I didn't feel responsible anymore. I felt tired, and underneath the tired, something close to grief, because the woman crying on the other end of that call used to be the person I planned my whole future around, and now she was someone trying to fabricate a legal claim against me out of desperation. I told her I was forwarding everything to my lawyer, and that if her attorney contacted me again, all future communication would go through Marisol. Then I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down or throw it across the room. I just set it on the counter, gently, the way you'd set down something you didn't want to break further than it already was. Marisol sent a formal response to Gregory Fenimore within the week, attaching the metadata analysis, the original closing documents, and a forensic comparison of the signature alongside the birthday card, which Renee's own father, of all people, confirmed still existed in a box of old cards he kept in his garage. He sent photos of the original card without being asked, once Brielle explained what was happening. I don't think he knew what his daughter had done until that moment. I heard later that he didn't speak to her for almost 3 weeks after. Gregory Fenimore withdrew the claim 11 days after Marisol's response landed in his inbox. No formal apology, just a short email citing insufficient documentation to proceed. Renee never contacted me again after that phone call. I don't know if that's because she was embarrassed, or because there was nothing left to gain, or because some part of her finally understood that the version of me she remembered, the one who'd wait, wasn't the one she'd be dealing with anymore. The fallout didn't stop with the two of us. Haley told me Renee's social circle had shrunk down to almost nothing by late summer. People who'd known her for years quietly stopped inviting her to things once the forgery story made its way around, the way these things always do in towns small enough that everyone shares the same 6 restaurants. Her business never recovered from the client exodus that started months earlier. She'd built her freelance brand consulting work largely on referrals, and referrals dry up fast once a community decides someone can't be trusted. Brielle told me Renee moved back into their mother's house permanently in August, the same house where she'd once expected to wait out a temporary break before sliding back into the life she'd left behind. I felt something I didn't expect when I heard that. Not satisfaction, something closer to sadness, the specific kind that comes from watching someone you used to love dismantle their own life trying to chase a version of happiness that was never actually available to them. Tyler, it turned out, had been seeing someone else the entire time he was texting Renee, the same pattern he'd run twice before in college. She'd built an entire collapse around a man who was using her the exact same way he always had. Brielle said Renee found out about the other girlfriend the same week she filed the forged claim against me, which made a certain ugly sense once I thought about it. Desperate people reach for whatever leverage is closest, even leverage built on a lie. There was a financial complication that dragged on longer than I expected. Even after Gregory Fenimore withdrew the claim, Marisol advised me to file a formal record of the forged document with the county recorder's office, just in case Renee or anyone acting on her behalf tried to resurrect the claim later under a different filing. That process took 6 weeks and cost me $800 in additional legal fees, money I paid without complaint because the alternative was leaving a loose thread that could unravel years down the line. I thought about calling her just to say I was sorry it ended the way it did, not for what she did to me, but for what she did to herself chasing it. I didn't, in the end. Some doors stay better closed, even when you understand exactly why they're shut. There were unexpected allies in all of this. Renee's father, a quiet man named Walter, who I'd always gotten along with, sent me a short email in September. He didn't say much, just that he was sorry for what happened and that he hoped I was doing well out west. I wrote back and told him I was. I meant it. Walter, I learned later from Brielle, had been the one who insisted Renee return the engagement ring to me directly instead of pawning it, which she'd apparently considered doing during the worst stretch of that summer. The ring arrived in a small padded envelope in October with no note attached. I sold it to a jeweler in Seattle for less than I'd paid for it and donated the proceeds to a local shelter, mostly because I didn't want the money sitting in my account as a reminder. Cody flew out to visit me in October. We sat on my balcony with the water in the distance, and he asked if I regretted any of it, the speed, the boxes, the note. I told him I regretted the note a little, the cruelty of it, even if it was true. I didn't regret the rest. He said that was probably the healthiest thing he'd ever heard me say. He also told me something I hadn't known, that Tyler had reached out to him too, separately, trying to get a read on whether I was really gone for good or just licking my wounds in another state. Cody told him the truth. I was gone for good. There was nothing left in Ohio for me to come back to, and even if there had been, I wasn't interested anymore in being anyone's contingency plan. I had a moment, just one, sitting alone on a Sunday morning in November, almost a year to the day since she'd sat on the edge of our bed and asked for a break. I was making coffee, and the smell of it reminded me of our old kitchen, the one with the bad lighting we always meant to fix and never did. I thought about the wedding we never had. had. The names we'd picked out for kids we never had either. Conversations we used to have at 2 in the morning about nothing important and everything important at the same time. I let myself feel that for exactly as long as the coffee took to brew, and then I let it go. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain, where I moved too fast, packed too efficiently, sold too quickly, where 4 years should have earned more patience than I gave it. I've sat with that version more than once, but patience isn't owed to someone who's already decided you're the fallback option while they chase the thing they actually want. I gave her 4 years of patience. I didn't owe her a fifth while she figured out if I was good enough compared to a man who'd already proven, twice, that he wasn't capable of being good to her at all. My life now is smaller in some ways and wider in others. I work from an office with a view I still haven't gotten tired of. I see Cody twice a year instead of every week, and somehow that makes the visits matter more. I dated someone briefly in the spring, a woman named Priya from my building, and it didn't work out, but it didn't break me either, which felt like its own kind of progress. I still think about Renee sometimes, not with anger anymore, mostly with a quiet kind of grief for the people we used to be before one bad decision unraveled 4 good years. She asked for a break to go figure out if she still had feelings for someone else. What she actually did was hand me the clearest answer I ever needed about whether she'd ever really chosen me at all. I didn't erase her out of spite. I erased her because staying would have meant waiting indefinitely for a verdict I already knew the answer to. Some people ask for space because they need to breathe. She asked for space because she needed an exit she could blame on timing instead of on herself. I don't know where Tyler is now, and I genuinely don't care. I know where I am. I'm 3,000 miles from that bedroom, that note, that bed where she sat twisting her ring like it had started to hurt. I built something real out here, slowly, the unglamorous way, one ordinary week at a time. It isn't the life I planned at the overlook off Route 9 with a ring I saved 4 months to buy, but it's mine, fully, without a verdict pending, and without a single piece of it waiting on someone else's clarity. Some nights I still think about that note taped to the boxes. Good luck with Tyler. I meant it as an exit line. Looking back, I think I also meant it as a door closing on the last version of myself who would have waited.